Yeah, so someone has had this camera quite taken it right apart, but they haven't kept track of where the screws have come from, and they haven't been familiar enough with the camera to be able to tell just by looking at the pile of loose parts which piece goes where, which piece they need to be fitting next. Well, of course that's something that only comes with practice and lots of it. Oh, the screws here on the top. I'm taking out the 4 screws that hold this whole front mechanism into the body, and that's loose. There's a little insert on the inside that screws into, and the insert in this case seems to have fallen out. At the base of the camera, our screws are down here underneath this ridiculous amount of adhesive. That one came out easily. The other one, I know it's over here somewhere. Oh, where is it? There it is. Yeah, that doesn't want to come loose. That's the glue has run down into there. Let's give this a little touch of magic solvent and see how it goes. Oh yeah, it's the screw's tight in the thread. It's not tight in the body. That means that that's very possibly a, I would say that's very possibly a cross-threaded screw, just from the feel of that. It's tight into the insert. It's not tight against the body. It's not pulled up tight, but it's binding on the thread. Okay, that is it going to come? It's rotating, but I suspect the insert's rotating because it wasn't locked correctly in position. That appears to be the case. Okay. The inserts I'm talking about are sort of D-shaped, and they lock into little sections on this outer shroud. If they're not pressed firmly into the correct position, mind you, they don't normally work themselves loose much. If they're not pressed firmly in there and you wind the screw up really tight, you could end up with that being damaged, and then it doesn't lock in position after that. But that's what's happened here. Yeah, so, and the adhesive is run down. That was one of those inserts there. The adhesive that someone's poured on here has run down into it, and it's got into the thread. That's why it doesn't want to come undone. That and the fact that it's not correctly positioned anyway. So I will just fight with this a little bit more. Really, I've got to get that pushed down into place so that it's locked in the body, because I obviously can't hold it from rotating otherwise. I don't like my chances. Okay, that's a bit entertaining. Worst case scenario, I've just got to drill the head off that screw. because it's going into an insert, so I can easily replace the insert on the other piece. That's our little coupling piece that couples the shutter release shaft to this lever, which then couples to the shutter. This is loose. The shaft here is revolving freely on the arm. Now that means that the adjustment, if you like, of the stroke of the shutter release would always be a problem if that's loose. That needs to be, basically it's just crimped on or riveted onto the top of that shaft. Where is it? Yeah, this tube here. And I just need to crimp it over at the top there a bit firmer so that it doesn't revolve. Which way do I need that to be? A bit round the other way, I think. There's the flat side. That side. Okay. It's even possible that that D-shaped cutout in the shroud has been chewed out by that bush, and it will never hold it firmly in place. I'm beginning to think that that will be the case. Alright, at this stage I'm going to stop, find my drills, drill the head off that screw, take that shroud out and deal with what I have to deal with. Back shortly. Well, the idea of drilling that screw out was a dismal failure because the screw had nothing to hold it steady, so it just wanted to revolve with the drill bit. But I was able to get a pair of pliers up inside there and hold that little bush in place and get the screw out. So where is that insert? There it is. You can see it's D-shaped. Well, it's got some crud on there which was stopping it from, yeah, the hole that it pushes into has been mutilated. So that was always going to be a problem. That is assembly damage from whenever it was assembled. Right, so let's take this apart. The top and bottom buttons that hold the front assembly push these buttons, these lock buttons, outwards. Here's the shroud, the outer shroud. Yeah, that, look at the state of that. Now this is some idiot, and I say idiot because I've attempted to glue those bushes in place, and you can see what happened as a result. This piece, oh, it's moving a bit better at the moment. This is not the correct spring. It's all arse about face. It might even be the correct spring in the wrong place. It's supposed to be around here acting against this post, not around here acting against that post. This is all very stiff. And of course this piece has been somewhat mutilated. That spring, we'll see if we can reshape that. That might go back in the right place if it appears to be the correct one. So these pieces are just about all to bits now. Let's get this out. This screw holds the little bracket that positions the transfer shaft here in the body. This transfer shaft of course couples with the rack and takes the action true to the front of the camera. That looks okay, it's very grimy. What have we got left now? Just the body. Well, I want to get all this filthy adhesive off there. That's ridiculously thick. That's just crazy. There's sheets of that rubbish on there. I want to get all of that off there, clean out all this sand and rubbish, all these traces of old grease. Now the leatherettes. The leatherette here is flapping. Means it's letting go of the body. So I'll have to remove that. Clean the leatherette and clean the body and glue it back in place. Now why is the leatherette let go? Well, normally they let go because of corrosion. Normally you get corrosion under the leatherette. I can see it's just cracking at that point too, so I have to be a bit careful about this. That's okay. Normally it's corrosion. See these white spots here, that's corrosion. That's where moisture's got down through the leatherette, and of course the corrosion happens between the glue. What's happening in the metal, so it's happening underneath the glue. So it means that the glue's no longer sticking to the metal at that point. The other thing that can cause this to go is if they get excessively greasy, probably with just skin oils from fingers. I think if that soaks through the leatherette, it can destroy the adhesive. This side here, if it's bad on one side of the camera, it's probably going to be bad on the other. This leatherette's stuck more firmly, but I'm going to have to remove it so that I can clean it and give it the same treatment. So I'm watching the leatherette closely as I slide the scalpel down underneath it, because the scalpel's not really cutting the glue away. It's almost acting like a lever. Leatherettes here are always stuck more closely right at the edge. That's where they're under the most tension, if you like, and that's where the adhesive is most likely going to have stuck the best. I can see a slight crack in the leatherette just at that point. That's it, it's off. So I've got my leatherettes off in one piece. See a bit of green corrosion here, that's a verdigris from that brass hinge. So I'm going to get all that crap off there. And the base of the camera, and now I'm looking critically at the back, the leatherette on the back of the camera, because it's flapping at this point. If the leatherettes are loose on the front, they're probably loose on the back. Now normally when you're servicing a Retina IIIC type camera, you're not needing to do this, because you don't really have to remove the leatherette to access anything. And getting it off in one piece and back on again, see that's stuck there, that's not wanting to come off. Getting it off in one piece and getting it back on again undamaged is always tricky. This is corrosion products in here, and it's around this brass hinge. It's like verdigris. Now that tells me that most likely the cause of the problem has been grease that's got in there. Now that's the sort of thing I would expect. See if I can. Yeah, I'm just concerned about one particular spot here. The leatherettes are often quite brittle. You can't just start peeling them off, they'll just fracture. So to be very gentle with this. And it's because the plastic material is very old. I think most plastics get more brittle as they age. Interestingly, when they made these cameras, they would have moved to leatherette from using leather to both reduce costs and to be able to maintain a better quality control, because leather, being a natural product, tends to be a bit variable. Now you can see here the back of the camera. Now that whitish, yellowy white looking stuff, that's corrosion products. That's all got to come off, and it's a bit greasy too. But all this will, most of that will scrape off, and what doesn't scrape off, the remnants, I'll be able to get off with a bit of solvent. But first I've got to get this leatherette off in one piece. This is not the worst case by any means. Here we've got all that corrosion product underneath helping the adhesive let go. Occasionally you need to remove the leatherettes from a camera that's in perfect condition, and the adhesive's in perfect condition, and it's doing a really good job of holding things in place, and then you have real trouble getting the leatherette off. You can see it just cracking along that point there, right on the end of the curve. Let's see if I can work back to that corner. Oh yeah, that's it. It's off. So I've got that off in one piece. You can see the start of his ice bumps here. And that's where lumps of corrosion have taken hold. You can see that green rubbish there. That's where the nickel plated brass rivets holding this end piece on have started to corrode. Likewise here and here. And here. And here. So I've got to clean up these leatherettes, get rid of all the traces of rubbish off them, and then hopefully clean up the body and start thinking about putting things back together once the pieces come back from the ultrasonic cleaner. Right, enough for the moment. So I'm starting here by removing the old adhesive and any lumps and bumps. So I'm just using the back edge of that scalpel blade to scrape this off. And so you get to white pieces like that, that's corrosion. So I've just got to finish doing both ends here at the front and then get the back. The back's slightly different because this is a different element. This is a casting, this is a pressing. The aluminium's a different mix, if you like. The adhesive sticks to it slightly differently, and the corrosion processes are probably slightly different as well. But you can see that scrapes off quite well. So here I'm being careful not to get back and strip the paint off these edges on the back, the painted edges. Got to make sure I don't run into those. The Retina IIIC series were painted a little bit better. The Retina IIA type series, the black painted edges on the doors, that paint was very poorly applied, or a very poor choice, and it's often missing. On the 3Cs and later models it's usually stuck quite well. Right, I'll carry on with this. Bring you back when I've got it all clean. Well, it's about 40 minutes later. As you can see, I've got the body all cleaned up, ready for the leatherettes to go back on it. All the dust and filth out of there, all the old grease and so forth gone. That part of the job's done. However, I still have to clean up my leatherettes. This is one of the front panels, and this one should be fairly easy. All I'm doing here is scraping it with a scalpel blade to scrape off the loose rubbish and any lumps and bumps of adhesive. And of course I've got to be fairly careful because the leatherettes are old and dry and brittle, and if I scrape too hard I could easily find myself pulling some of the leatherette away. I'm quite happy with the state of that, and I'll give that a wipe with some naphtha, cigarette lighter fluid. And I'm not using buckets of the stuff, I'm just soaking it onto a cotton bud or Q-tip, and I'm just wiping that surface. And what I'm wanting to do here is remove any grease or loose dust and so forth from the back of the leatherette. And that piece is ready to go back on. I'll pop that to one side. Its mate, that should be easy too, that shouldn't create a problem. And the back piece, likewise, I'm not expecting any problems with that. That'll just be exactly as you just saw me do, except more of it. But this piece, this is the leatherette from the base. Now this has got a thick incrustation of various adhesive on it. It's anything but flat. You can tell the way that catches the light. It's not a flat piece of leatherette. I've got to get that rubbish off there before I can do anything useful with that in the way of putting it back on. So I'm just going to tentatively scrape at this, see if any of that adhesive will scrape away. And as I suspected, it doesn't. So I'm going to dampen some of that with a bit of naphtha, which will hopefully soften the adhesive, and I can then scrape it or rub it away. That's the idea. I can't use anything more aggressive than the naphtha, because if I do, I'll damage the leatherette completely. It's already a lot less than pretty, but anything else I use would soak through it and destroy the plastic. I'll just have to work on this one little area at a time until I've got this rubbish off here. This is certainly working. The adhesive is softening under the solvent action of the naphtha. It's not turning into gooey adhesive like it probably should, but it's coming soft and it's coming away, which is all that I'm concerned about. If the worst came to the worst, I would have to cut a new leatherette for the base of the camera. And of course I don't have anything that exactly matches. Oh, that's that cut there. I've got to be very careful of that. Can't afford to lose that. And of course the leatherette's a bit of a complex shape, with its curves at the ends and the holes, and getting the holes centered and correctly sized is always tricky. Alright, I'll bring you back when this piece is ready to go. Well, with the leatherettes all cleaned up, they can go back on the body now. Not the base leatherette, of course, that can only go back on pretty late in the piece after all the chrome trim and everything's back in place. But that's cleaned up reasonably well too. I've got all the lumps and bumps off it. Hopefully it'll actually stick back fairly flat. These ones, however, I'm not expecting to have any trouble with. So I'll start with the back leatherette. And what I'll do is I'll just apply some adhesive direct to the leatherette. Then I'll use a toothpick to spread it around and get it nice and even. As always with leatherettes, you're wanting to make sure that you get a good even coat, and particularly get to the edges, because if something's going to peel, it peels from the edges out towards the centre. It doesn't peel from the centre towards the edges. That's not a thing. And I can see that I've been a bit over generous here when I've applied this adhesive, so the excess I'll just scrape off and stick on another bit of leatherette. Right, want those big lumps. I don't know what this work mat's going to be like for cleaning up yet. It's the first time I've used it, so doubtless I'll find out. Now, most important, when you're putting leatherette back on the door, make sure you've got it the right way up. Very depressing if you finish the job, get it all nicely smoothed out, and then discover that the writing's upside down. I'm just rubbing that squeezed out adhesive away. Making sure that the leatherette's tucked right in properly into the moulding of the back door there, and in against the hinges on this side. That looks fine. I'll just take a little bit of naphtha on a cotton bud. Just wipe along there to lift off any excess. And any that's got to this is sitting on the surface of the leatherette. There's a little tiny pinhole through the leatherette at that point that I'll fix with some black wax later on. However, that looks good. So I'm quite happy with that. Now the pieces for the front. Make sure I get a good coat on the corners, because these leatherettes typically come adrift, and it's right at the corner is the vulnerable spot. I need to make sure that there's adhesive right to the corner. Another drop there. That should do. Likewise, this one doesn't have words written on it, but the embossed lines are towards the top of the camera, not the bottom. So you can tell which side it goes by making sure you've got the embossed lines towards the top of the camera. Just peel that back out the way. And get it centered up so that the chrome trims, top and bottom, come up to the leatherette, or at least have a matching gap top and bottom. Don't have it all one way. That looks good. Again, I'll just wipe down that edge here in case there's any adhesive on it. That looks very good. Wipe down that surface. So that's that piece. One more for the front, and that's those leatherettes in place. I could have left putting all these leatherettes on right till the very last, but I'm got the mechanical components for the camera are busy soaking in some solvent at the moment to get rid of all the grease and hardened grease and wax and rubbish. So I'll do this job now and let them soak for a little bit longer. Typically I put the mechanical components in a solvent which is a wax and grease remover. It's made for painters to use. It's wax and grease remover. It's very good at breaking up that thick, crusty waxy dried grease. It causes so much trouble with the focus helical. It's very good at softening that. So I'll just leave it to soak, and then when I'm ready to go, I put those parts through the ultrasonic cleaner. They get 10 minutes in the solvent, and then I drain them off, and then they get 10 minutes in heavy detergent in hot water, and that gets rid of any other rubbish. Then they get rinsed and dried, and at that stage the parts come out looking shiny and new, probably cleaner than they were at the factory. That's all looking good. Bit of glue squeeze out onto the hinge there. I'll just get that off. Make sure that leatherette is tucked in tight at all the corners in particular. That looks good. So I'm happy with that. That's those leatherettes back in place, firmly in place, and all the corrosion and rubbish from underneath is gone. So that should be good. I'm pleased to see that, and I suppose I can move on to the next part.